let's review. The Mishnah, the famous Tallis Mishnah. Shnaim Ochazin Tallis, two people walk into a Beis Din. They're both clinging to a cloak. The cloak from now on will be referred to as a Tallis, even though it has no religious significance. This one says, what's the first guy say? I found it. I found it. And the other person responds, I found it. Then the Mishnah says, this one says, it's all mine. And to which the other responds, it's all mine. How do we resolve this case?
Split it.
But before we split it,
They have to take an oath.
each has to take an oath, right? And it's a very unusual oath, because the oath that they have to take doesn't necessarily reflect the argument they made. So each one has to say that I don't deserve less than half. They are going to be awarded half, but before they can get that half, the formula that they have to use is that I don't deserve less than half. And then after we've done that, we sell the talus, split the proceeds between them. There's more to the Mishnah. There are 3 other cases. We're going to pause there because the part of the Gemorah that we're learning right now only relates to the first part of the Mishnah. So one of the first things the Gemorah needed to tackle is, why does it say, I found it and I found it? And then it says, it is mine and it is mine. Right? Why was that necessary? Why did you have to have 2 versions of essentially the same thing? So we had 2 potential solutions. The first potential solution was?
That finding is not seeing it is not
Correct.
finding.
That you need to know that finding does not equal, that seeing does not equal ownership, right? So when a person said, I found it, maybe they thought that it means that I saw it. Okay, good. So that was the one possibility. And then the other possibility that we gave, and they're not in contrast to each other, they're each filling in the picture for us. The other opinion that we had, or the other version that we had, was that when they say I found it, that's talking about a case
Buying and selling.
where they found it. And when they say it's all mine, that's talking about a case where they each claim that they bought it. And then the Gemorah had to explain why it would be necessary to have 2 of the same cases, essentially, because they sound like they're the same, but the outcome is for sure going to be the same. Why did I have to have both cases? And we explained the psychology of why a person may be willing to excuse grabbing something that somebody else found, because, hey, it was your good luck and now it's no longer your good luck. And the psychology of the person who might say, I'd claim something that you think you paid for because go buy another one. Right? Those were the 2 things. We're now at the next stage of the Gemorah. Now that we've resolved all of that, the next stage of the Gemorah is to test how is it that there are no names of any rabbis in this Mishnah. Because the implication of no names of any rabbis in the Mishnah is what?
It's completely widely accepted.
That it's not widely, it is totally accepted, absolutely accepted. Because if there was anybody, even if it was just one person, remember, many of the debates in Mishnah are against the widely accepted view versus the individual view. Not just minority, it's an individual. You have Rebbe and the Chachamim. That means everybody versus him. So if there's no name in the Mishnah, the implication is not that it's widely accepted. The implication is that it is accepted across the board. Now, if that's the case, we just have to test if that makes sense to us. So what the Gemorah will do is, at literally the speed of your large language model, it will assess the entire Mishnah and say, hang on, there's an anomaly, there's an anomaly, there's an anomaly. Let's test each of those against our Mishnah, because it feels like maybe that rabbi who said that is in disagreement with our Mishnah, and then we have to try and resolve it. Yeah? So, we have completed the first of those cases. We've scratched the surface of the second, and there's still a third one to come. So the first case was somebody called, anybody remember?
Reb.
That's a good start. Okay? So the first case was somebody called Ben Nanas. That's the second case. The first case we had was somebody called Ben Nanas. And Ben Nanas dealt with a scenario where there were 2 individuals who both had a claim against the same person, and nobody could prove their claim. What do we say the guy has to do? He's got to pay them both.
No, that's right.
And because there's no records. It was a poor choice on his behalf.
So it's their work of it.
And, right, so the worker was the one example. There were two examples of the same thing. And Benanas is of the view that they get their money without an oath, because you can never have two people take an oath if those oaths are contradictory. That's why we thought Benanas is at loggerheads with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah is telling two people to take an oath that is contradictory. How did we resolve it? Anybody remember how we resolved it? Okay, we resolved it by saying they are very different cases. In that case, we know for certain that the one guy is saying, absolutely, I did not get my money, and the other guy is absolutely saying, I paid it. In our case, nobody's saying anything absolutely. In other words, the guy's saying, I found it, but he has no evidence that the other guy didn't get there before him, etc. So they're not the same case. That brings us to where we are now. Sumchus. Sumchus is the name of a sage. Sumchus debates the sages, the other sages, the Chachamim, on two occasions. That was the missing page that I forgot to print last time, which I've now given you. So we're going to go backwards in order to go forwards. We're going to have a look at the principles that underlie this case. We're then going to see that it looks like the thinking of Sumchus is incompatible with the ruling of our Mishnah. Okay? Once, and this is classic Gemorah. This is classic Gemorah for you. So again, just follow this one, because there's a lot going on in this piece. You've got Sumchus debating the sages. Sumchus makes a statement that the Gemorah says is incompatible with our Mishnah. The Gemorah will then respond to that by saying, 1 second, actually, it sounds like the sages are also incompatible with our Mishnah. So we're going to land up with a double kasha over here. Okay, we thought we have a simple kasha. Sumchus is incompatible with our Mishnah. We're going to land up with a double kasha. We're going to have to address both of them. Before we can do any of that, let's get some background information. That's page 12, which you've just got now. The debate between Sumchus and the sages centers on two principles. The first principle is called Mamon Hamutal B'Safek Cholkin. Okay? Mamon Hamutal B'Safek Cholkin. Let's unpack that phrase. What is Mamon? We did. Money. Even in English, you have the word mammon. Hamutal, that is suspended. That's what the word mutal means. It's suspended. B'Safek, in doubt. So money that is in limbo, money that is in a state of doubt. What do you do with that money? Cholkin. What do you do with that money? Cholkin. Divide it between whoever is claiming that money. This is the thinking of Sumchus. So Sumchus says, if I have a quantum of money that is in dispute, and it will remain in dispute because I can't prove, there's no evidence, there's no witnesses, no documents, then the fairest way to deal with this money is just 50-50. Then you have another principle. The next principle that we're going to learn is a very widespread principle in Gemorah. It goes like this. Hamoitzi mechaveroi. What does hamoitzi mean?
It's found. It's found. No.
That's good. That's ha-motzei would be find. Ha-motzi. Right, what does ha-motzi lechem in haaretz mean?
The bread.
Lechem is the bread. What's ha-motzi?
Break.
No.
Who
brings forth bread from the ground. Ha-moitzi, he brings out from the ground. So, ha-moitzi, somebody wants to bring out, take away, mei chaveroi, from his peer, alav haraya. The burden of proof is on him. This is a very logical principle. A very logical principle. It basically, this principle, which is I was going to say it's a global principle. The burden of proof is always on the claimant. If I am the person who is currently holding the asset, then I am the person who's believed to be more likely to be its owner. If you're claiming the asset, the burden of proof is on you. Why is this such an important principle?
So that's not Simchas.
This is the sages
That's the
who
sages.
Simchas debates against.
Because it doesn't have that you've got to prove that you.
Why is it such an important principle?
Because if you can't prove it, then it doesn't belong to you.
Right, so why is that such an important principle?
You can't have people just making spurious claims
Correct.
just to get it.
Because without this principle, you have anarchy. Imagine if I could, at any given time, walk over to any person and claim that an item in their possession belongs to me. Without a real basis for that claim, the world would be chaos. That's why this is a university accepted principle. You cannot get an asset
And it
from
comes
somebody
right.
without.
People think it comes from all these legal systems.
That's right, exactly. But it's so logical. You cannot take something from a person without real evidence. Now let me ask you this. What constitutes evidence in Judaism?
Witnesses?
Witnesses. Zehu. Witnesses.
In a written document,
Okay, let's talk about it. So a written document. What does the document say?
it's like if you've got a deed, if you've got a house that you own.
What is it? So what does the document say?
Because I repaid the loan.
Okay.
I signed it.
And what makes it a valid document?
Witness signed it.
Witnesses.
No witness.
Right? So there is only one form of evidence.
Yeah,
Witnesses.
fine.
So when they say "Hamoitzin Chavero Olav Haraya," and get used to this phrase because it comes up often in Gemorah, not only in our Gemorah, right across the board, it comes up in Halacha. It's a very commonly used phrase. "Hamoitzin Chavero Olav Haraya," or some people might just abbreviate it and say "Hamoitzin Chavero." Right? What we're saying is that the only way to extract something from another person is with admissible evidence in court, which means you have witnesses either in person or we can verify that the witnesses on the document were valid. That's it. So,
So they don't necessarily have to be there. They just have to be.
they don't have to be present if we can verify that they are the witnesses. So, let's have a look at one of, it's not the only example. There are multiple examples where Sumchus and the sages debate this topic. We're going to use one. Shor Shanog Achasapora. I've got to be honest. If Shnaim Ochazin Tallis is one of the most well-known Mishnahs, so is Shor Shanog Achasapora. Right? You know, it's one of the most well-known Mishnahs that exists. Okay? So Shor Shanog Achasapora. You have an ox that attacks and gores a cow. Menimtso ubra betzida. We arrive on the scene, and the fetus that cow was carrying is now lying next to the cow. Okay? Ve'ein yodua, and we cannot tell, imacheloi nogcha yolda, did the cow first give birth and then get attacked? Or imishe nogcha yolda, or did it give birth because it was attacked?
Why would that be a question?
Why is it a question?
The value of...
Okay, let's work it out.
Because then the ox is killed too. And
Okay.
the value is higher.
Okay, good.
Well,
The
the ox
If it's born before it's gored, the calf has value. If it's not part of its mother, it's not viable.
Exactly. Right? So let's see what happens over here. We need a bit of background. The background is that an animal that is dangerous, its owner is always liable for its damages. An ox is not considered a dangerous animal. Okay? Interesting, right?
Same in civil law today about a dog.
So-
if a dog bites you, and it's not acting contrary to its nature and bites,
Right.
depends whether you're liable or not.
Exactly. So, in other words, we expect that we have, at home, we expect that most people's dogs are trained in some way and therefore not naturally killer dogs. So, yeah, okay, but
Ox is considered
so
timid.
an ox is considered a timid creature. How's that? How interesting is that? Fascinating, right?
So
Fascinating.
there must have been a reason why.
Fascinating. By the way, just as an aside, the Gemorah will, in this context, when it talks about oxes that gore, so let's say now it's an anomaly that the ox has gored because it's considered a timid creature. So one of the ways that you can test if it has settled down back into its ordinary nature is if it allows children to play with it. My question is always, who puts the children up to test? Right?
So your neighbor's kid.
Okay? The kid who misbehaved in class. But if you think about it, the whole concept of bullfighting is you have to instigate. It's fascinating, right? You have to instigate for the bull to attack you.
Just wants to be left alone.
Interesting, right? Okay. Whereas, let's say that a person had a snake, because that's the classic example that the Gemorah uses. There's no such thing as a timid snake. It doesn't exist. You can say whatever you want. You could be a snake charmer, whatever it is. A snake is always considered a dangerous animal. And therefore, the owner is always liable for any harm caused by that snake. Now, snakes are going to harm humans and animals, and ox may damage property as well. So the range of possibilities is greater. You're always liable for damages to property. We're talking specifically here about goring. For an ox to gore is unusual. Okay?
Responsible for damage to property, even if it's not a goring ox.
Well, again, okay, so just to qualify, an ox effectively has two kinds of damage for which the owner would be liable. One is aggressive damage, in other words, it gores, and the other is pleasurable damage, which means it eats your crops. It scratches its back on your wall and your wall falls over. There you're completely liable all the time because that's normal behavior for an ox and you need to keep your ox safe. But if it suddenly attacks another animal, that's unexpected. And so we excuse you the first time, we excuse you the second time. After the third time, you now have to lock up your ox.
So if it's grazing in an adjacent field, if it wanders off into the neighbor's
Correct, then you're
field,
100% liable for that.
But after the third time, you said you have to lock up your ox, and then what happens?
So this is what I wanted to get to.
This was that's not with goring, is it?
I'm talking about goring.
This is with goring.
So again, if it's gored an animal 3 times,
Okay.
thereafter its status changes. This is a wild ox. This is a temperamental ox. This ox is now your liability 100%. Now what does that mean? It means that if an ox is in that natural state, which is what we call tom, interesting word, right? Like tame in English, and it breaks ranks, it has a bad day, whatever, and it attacks this other cow, the owner of the ox is only liable for half the value of the damage. So it kills the cow. Why? Because it's unexpected. So we've got to be kind of fair to both. Can't throw the book at the owner.
You must have provoked them.
Because, well, not that you must have provoked, but you can't expect somebody to be on guard over a timid creature. That's an unfair expectation. Whereas, if it already has established a pattern, and it's done it 3 times, now we call it a mu'ad, like the word mo'ed, which is a special time in the calendar that is designated for a purpose. This ox is now designated as a belligerent ox. Now if this ox attacks and kills, the owner is liable for 100% of the value of the victim's animal. Okay?
Is that ox belligerent for the rest of its career?
No, that's what I said. If it goes back to being tum, which is measured by its docile around children, then it can, over a period of time, can reestablish its natural state. Okay? Okay, so with that in mind, let's read on. So we don't know what happened. Meshalim chatzi nezek lepara. So the owner of the attacking ox has to pay 50% of the value of the damaged, or in this case, the killed cow. That's normal, right? That's what happens. Because it is a tum, it is a docile animal that we didn't expect to attack, and the owner of a docile animal is only liable for half of the value lost by the victim. Uravia nezek levlad. But now we're not sure if he is liable for the death of the fetus or not. So if he were liable, it would be 50%. But we don't know. So it's 50% of 50%. Okay? 25% of the value of the ox. That's the Mishnah. Says the Gemorah. Omer Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda quotes Shmuel, Zoi divrei sumchus. That Mishnah was authored by Sumchus. Why by Sumchus? The Omar, because his approach is Mamana mutal besafek cholkin. Whenever you have money that is in doubt, that cannot be resolved independently, objectively, split that value. So we don't know the status of the fetus. We don't know if he's liable for the death of the fetus or not. So the 50% he'd be liable for, split that between them. And so therefore the victim only gets 25% of the value of the fetus. Because if the fetus...
Of the fetus. Not
Correct.
50% plus the 20%.
So 50% of the cow is not in question.
Okay.
The part that's in question is the fetus. Was the fetus still part of the cow, in which case you don't pay for it? Was the fetus independently killed, in which case you do pay for it? So how much would you pay for it? 50% of its value. That's in question. Split the 50% in two. He only has to pay 25%. That is sumchus.
But he's talking about money.
Yes, only money. It's always only money.
It's always this is not.
What? This is money.
Oh, it's the value.
The value. In fact, the way that you do it is you actually sell the carcass, and that contributes. So there's a whole process. I'm not getting into it now.
But that's a bit
Yeah. That's sumchus.
Yeah.
Aval, but Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul continues. Aval chachamim oimrim, but the chachamim say, and this is very important language coming up over here. Ze klal gadol badin. This is a foundational principle of Jewish law. In the same way as Rabbi Akiva says, Ze klal gadol baTorah, that love of your fellow Jews, an underpinning of the whole of Judaism. This is an underpinning of all civil law. What is it? Hamoitzi michaveiroi olav horaya. If I want to extract money from you, the burden of proof is on me. In other words, the victim can never prove if the fetus died because of the attack or not. Therefore, he can never get money for the fetus. Because you can only get money for a claim that you can prove.
This is chachamim.
The Chachamim. So the Chachamim would say, what does the guy pay? 50% of the value of the cow, 0 of the value of the fetus. Because the fetus is in question, you can't prove it, you can never take money from somebody if you cannot prove it.
So the 1/4 is sumchus.
The 1/4 is sumchus.
Sumchus is
Yes.
not of the same.
Correct. Correct.
And it
Correct.
comes like chachamim. It comes out.
Yes, for sure. But what's relevant for our conversation is, wow, this sounds problematic in the context of our Mishnah. Because the whole principle that Sumchus uses is, if you don't know who should get the money, and you cannot prove it, then you split it. And our Mishnah said, you can't split it till you swear in court.
And not only that,
Sumchus
it's a
never
general
said.
principle.
No, that's the next opinion. Sumchus is not a general principle. But Sumchus never said a word about an oath. For Sumchus, it's automatic. If you don't know what to do with the money, if you can't prove it, split it. Our Mishnah sounds a whole lot more strict than Sumchus. You want to split the money, first put them through the ringer. First make them stand up with a Torah in a court and swear by all that is holy, with Hashem's name, That's a very different story. So why is Sumchus not in our Mishnah as a dissenting voice? And while we're about it, the Gemorah will then say, while we're on that topic, sounds like all the other Chachamim who were involved in that debate also don't agree with our Mishnah. Because they don't offer an oath as a solution to a dilemma. They only accept proof. There's no space for an oath. So, how do you square this Mishnah with either of their views? Okay, got that? All right.
With the fetus, there's no way of...
Well, there's no way because nobody saw it. Nobody saw it happen, right? There's nobody saw it happen. There's no witnesses.
What happens if there were witnesses?
Oh, perfect. If there was somebody there, you wouldn't have this Mishnah in the first place.
Like science or...
Oh, no. Eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony. That's the only acceptable testimony in Judaism. Right? Which is fascinating, right? All the tech in the world would be meaningless in a Jewish court. Right, page 13 gives you the overview of how this next piece is going to work. And the reason that I had to put that is because there are so many moving parts that you can so easily get lost in this next section. So we had to have an overview. You should have. I gave it out last time.
No, I didn't.
So you know what? So
I thought we were coming to go.
okay. So here's another one. Here's a copy if you want, and I'll just I'll look at it on the screen. So at least there's another physical copy. Hey,
I'll share it on
you good?
Yeah.
Okay, fine, perfect. Okay, let's look at the overview. This is one of those where they say you got a halt cop. Eventually, as we go through it, it will all start to come together like a puzzle. But initially, it's going to feel like a real puzzle.
Fetch.
No. Puzzle. There are so many moving parts over here. Okay. The first thing that's going to happen, represented by the question mark, is the Gemorah is going to ask the same question that it asked about Ben Nanas. There's this man called Sumchus. He's one of the sages, and what he's saying seems to be different to our Mishnah. Then the Gemorah will explain what he said. That's what I'm calling over here the reason for the question. What Sumchus said and why we feel it's different to our Mishnah. Got that? Okay. Instead of answering that question, the Gemorah is going to say, yes, but. Now, anybody knows if you're having a robust debate with somebody, the yes, but argument, it can be one of the most frustrating arguments, right? Yes, but, or as they call it in today's world, whataboutism. So instead of addressing the Sumchus issue, the Gemorah says, whoa, hang on a second. Of course, these are all anonymous. It's not like there's certain rabbis in the Gemorah who are attached to any of these views. This is the Gemorah unpacking a concept. So the Gemorah says, whoa, hang on a second. Before you raise your ire at the fact that Sumchus seems to be in disagreement with our Mishnah, and yet the Mishnah doesn't acknowledge that, those same sages that Sumchus debates, they also seem to be in conflict with our Mishnah.
New info.
No, it's not new info. As soon as you learn the Mishnah, you should have this info. We're alerting you to it, right? We're alerting you to it. So effectively what we got is... Yeah, correct. So, correct. To us, it's new info, yes. So effectively saying, Kashya, well, if you think you've got a Kashya, I've got a Kashya. Then the Gemara is going to have to give us the basis for that Kashya. In other words, it's going to have to tell us what the rabbis said. So what have we got so far? Raising the question based on Sumchus, then telling us what Sumchus said so we know why it's a question. Responding by saying, yeah, but what about the rabbis? And then explaining what they say. And based on that, why it appears to be a challenge to our Mishnah.
Can I just say, if he's not mentioned...
Who, Sumchus?
Yeah. Then you could argue, like, spoiler alert, whatever, that maybe he's not actually in... Maybe it could resolve. Because if he was really in contradiction with the opinion, then
the implicit,
they would have said it.
100%,
Kasha, right?
100%. The implicit message of all of this is obviously there's no conflict.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have been mentioned. Let's work out why.
Yeah,
True, absolutely.
That's what this is all about, going through that whole process.
Yes, right. This is just refining, checking checks and balances, making sure that it all works, due diligence. We haven't left anybody out. We'll prove to you that the Mishnah knew what it was doing. That's basically what we're doing. Now, last in, first out. So you raised the question about the rabbis. We'll first answer your question about the rabbis before we address Sumchus. So that's what the Gemorah will do next. It will answer the question posed by the view of the rabbis.
Is it always too lost in first out?
No, not necessarily.
Like bracket.
Often, but not always. But what happens next, you wouldn't necessarily expect. The answer we use to explain why the Chachamim are not in conflict with our Mishnah only makes the question about Sumchus stronger. So you started with a question about Sumchus. You thought you could deflect that question by saying, yes, but what about the rabbis? Not because we wanted to deflect the question, because we want to examine everything thoroughly. We were satisfied with the answer given in response to why the rabbis are not in conflict with our Mishnah. The problem is that just opened our eyes to a whole depth of how problematic Sumchus's opinion is.
That jumped on the bandwagon.
Right.
And when I read Sumchus, it sounded perfect.
Of course.
Of
course. It is perfect. No, it's not that it is perfect. We just have to go through the process to understand how. Okay? So then the Gemorah is going to have to give an answer to satisfy why Sumchus, despite how it looks, is really not in contrast to our Mishnah. Okay, obviously that's what we have to do next. Thing is, the Gemorah will have a problem with our answer. Okay, so that's what we're calling up here the secondary challenge, right? So you're giving an answer, we say, not so happy with that answer. So then the Gemorah is going to have to reply and satisfy my new challenge. And then the Gemorah is going to say, I don't like that answer either. And that will force us to the final conclusion, the correct answer that satisfies how Sumchus is not in conflict with our Mishnah. So can you see what I mean by a lot of moving parts over here? That's the thing. Once you have this map in front of you, it makes it a lot easier to put it all together. But there are multiple moving parts of it. And this is like real Gemorah now. You know, this is when people talk about learning a sugya, whatever the case is, this is now, I'm not chas v'shalom saying that the previous things were not sugyas, but now we're like really forcing ourselves just to hold a whole lot of information in all the right places as we go through the steps. This is kind of now the real deal.
They all have 5 steps, only this one.
Oh, no, every Gemorah is different.
Or
Every,
even more.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Every Gemorah is unique. There are patterns. There are certain patterns of, Gemorah processes, but there's no template for how many questions you have to have, or how many answers you have. It depends on
coding. The brackets and
yeah, exactly, brackets, exactly.
nested loops.
Okay, and that's why on page 14, at the top of the page, I say the best form of defense is exactly, and that's what's happening over here. So, you have a question about Sumchus. I will beat you back with a question about the Rabbanan, about the Chachamim. Okay, that's basically what we're seeing over here. Let's quickly run through. We do have all of these words, or at least we've gone through all of these words already, but let's just quickly run through again because the revision is good. So, Mammon is money. Safek is doubt. Yud Tzadik Aleph is exit. So, right? Yetzia, exit, right? To go out. But if I change the form of the verb to motzi, then I'm causing you, or I'm causing your money to exit. That's what I'm taking out. Bringing out, exactly. Raya is a
Is it a raya question or
proof. A raya is a proof. You can turn it into a question. You could say, ha raya. Like, what's your proof? Okay. My. What is my? No, that was a statement. What is my? Yeah, my is what? Okay? Right, my time. What is the reason? Right? My binayu, what is the difference between them? That's the word my. But as good Jewish language inflections go, we could take the word my and flip it from a very simple, innocuous statement into a full-blown attack. How do we do that?
my?
So let's pretend we're having a Jewish conversation. So the Jewish conversation goes like this. Well, let's first see how a non-Jewish version of the same conversation will go, and then a Jewish version of the conversation, okay? So the non-Jewish version of the conversation goes like this. Is that a new watch? What's a typical non-Jewish person's response? Yes, thank you very much. I just got it. I'm glad that you noticed, whatever. What's a Jewish response?
A new watch? Are you kidding?
What do you think? It's second hand. Right? That's Elamai.
How do you think I can afford a new
Right?
watch?
Exactly. My is what? It's a nice, innocuous query. Elamai is consternation. Elamai, well, what did you think? Right? It's like snappy answers to stupid questions from Mad Magazine. Remember that? Yeah. Oh, is that your dog? No, it's right. So it's that kind of. It's consternation. Ve'elamai. What else did you think? Except over here, we're not asking it as what else did you think. We're saying ve'elamai. Rather, instead of thinking this way or asking that question, what else should we be considering?
But isn't Ella always that?
Well, Ella is always a flip.
Yeah.
Right? Ella is always a no.
I'd rather consider this.
Exactly. Forget what you. So this Ella is now, instead of saying, don't think that's the answer, Ella, this is the answer. This is Ella Mai. Don't think that's the question. Rather, this is the big question. You think you've got the $1 million question. No. This is the $1 million question.
LMI is?
That's Ella Mai. So you're focused and so worked up on that question. Ella Mai, what about that? Okay. So let's start the section. The first few words we're familiar with because we already had them before. Benanas, leima, masnisin, deloi, kesumchus. Let's suggest that perhaps our Mishnah does not work with sumchus, does not fit the view of Sumchus. Exactly like we said before, let us suggest that our Mishnah does not fit the view and opinion of Ben Nanas. Same kind of question. Then we have to justify why. Okay, so if you go back to the map before, first we raise what the question is, then we say why it's a question. Because. Right? Because. Because if you were trying to say how this case should be ruled according to the view of Sumchus, Ha Omar. Anybody remember what that is? Ha Omar.
Did he not say?
Did he not say?
It's written down.
Did he not say Mamoin hamutal besafek, money that is suspended in doubt? Cholkin, you divide. Now the Gemorah adds words that are not in the original Sumchus debates in other places, but is relevant over here for us to understand the context and why this is a question. Cholkin means, says the Gemorah, Be'loi Shavua.
Will you see that inside?
There's no brackets. No brackets, so there's no clue in the Gemorah that's telling you that this is the add-on. But it's contextualizing for us that as far as Sumchus is concerned, the solution for money that is in limbo is to divide it. Below Shvur, he never demands taking an oath, and our Mishnah expects an oath. Sounds like a conflict. That's the question on Sumchus. So the Gemara responds, as we know, the Jewish answer to a question is a question. Says the Gemara, Ve'elamai. So what would you rather say? Because there are two views in that debate about the ox that gored the cow. There's Sumchus on the one hand and the sages on the other hand. So if you're telling me Sumchus does not fit the Gemara, does not fit the Mishnah, I'm sorry, then what are you suggesting? Ve'elamai. What are you suggesting instead? Rabbanon. You see how that goes? Because there are only two views over there. So if they're in conflict, logic says maybe one of them is in conflict with our Mishnah. But then by logical deduction, the other should be aligned with our Mishnah. So for Elamai, so what are you going to tell me? Rabbanon, you're going to tell me the Chachamim in that debate are aligned with our Mishnah? How's that possible? Ha-amrei, don't they say in that context, ha-moitzi mechaveiroi, that if you want to extract money from somebody else, alav haraya, you have to bring proof. What is proof? Witnesses. An oath is not proof. It's a mechanism of the courts to squeeze the truth out of people. It's not proof. It's not evidence.
It doesn't require witnesses, so you can't say.
Exactly. The Mishnah doesn't require witnesses. So you're making it sound as if Sumchus is the big outlier over here who potentially is at loggerheads with our Mishnah. Sounds like everything about that way of dealing with issues that are in doubt, both Sumchus and his adversaries, the rabbis, they're all not aligned with our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no. The rabbis, that's an easy solve. That's an easy solve. Easy solve. So before we get to how the Gemara starts to answer this, let's quickly get ourselves some relevant vocabulary. The word hi, not a greeting in English, not a shark in Afrikaans. Hi in Aramaic. That's quite cute because sometimes the Gemara will use an expression that sounds almost as if you're in Jamaica. Hi mon. Right? What does it mean? What's mon?
Not the same thing, obviously.
Well, actually, mon is a person, someone, right? And hi means this. Hi means this. Okay? So our Gemara is going to ask at this point, hi, my. So this question that you've raised, my, how do we deal with it? What are we supposed to do with it? Because you've now raised a double question. We thought it was just going to be a question about Sumchus. Turns out it's a double question. It's about Sumchus and about the rabbis. So my, what are we supposed to do with this? That's how the Gemara is going to go. Our next word, which is just the root of the word, is Shin Lamed Mem. Shin Lamed Mem. Now, unfortunately for us, that's a word that has multiple meanings. So we've got to find the right meaning for this particular context. What is the meaning is? So let's find the most no, I don't want to say the word primitive. The most core meaning of the letters Shin Lamed Mem, and all the other meanings extend from that.
Asa Shalom means there's no issue.
Okay, but what does the word mean?
So no, it's a completion.
Complete.
It's complete.
Complete. Okay? Shin Lamed Mem means complete. Now, what are the words that come out of that? What are the words that come out of that? Shalom. Peace. What's peace? Everything is whole.
Yeah.
How do you say pay in Hebrew? I'm saying pay money. How do you say pay money in Hebrew? Shalem. Tashlum is payment. Why? Because now the transaction is complete. Or my debt is removed. Whichever you want, it comes from the root complete. Okay. In the context we're about to discover it in the Gemorah, it will form the root of the word more on the shalom side. Okay? That's where it's going to go. Pei Lamed Gimel. Pei Lamed Gimel. Anybody know what that stands for? I mean, what that's the root for?
Well, I know the root, but it means pligi. It's the argument. There's
Correct.
no
So
argument
divide.
to pligi.
Means to divide. Divide. Very good. And is it a Hebrew or an Aramaic word?
Aramaic.
It's actually Hebrew. Right? Plug hamincha.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Different to Cholkim.
Cholkim means more, I mean, you can be mechalek, you can split something. Same concept. So you have what's called a Dor Hafloga, was the generation who built the Tower of Babel, and then they were split up into different dialects and different cultures, etc.
So you got Hebrew in the Gemorah, eh?
Yeah, believe it or not. So we'll have an Aramaicized version of the word. Okay, but Pei Lamed Gimel means to divide. Very useful word. Hashta. Now when you hear that, you immediately think of Shweki. Hashta. By God, all right? What does hashta mean?
Shotay drink.
Yeah, that would be if it was Hebrew. But this hashta is with an aleph at the end, and to drink is with a hey at the end. So hashta, either you know it or you don't. It's a difficult. You're not going to find a way to work it out from the words. Hashta means now. So very often the Gemorah will say, now that we know this, right? Hashta, now that we know this, we'll make the following logical deductions. And I'm sure, Steve, you'll know this one. Kol shekain.
Oh. Call is every
You won't get it from the translation. Kol shekain.
No.
Kol shekain means how much more so. It's exactly the same as Kal V'chomer, except Kal V'chomer is usually very specific in how it works. Kol shekain is much more generic. Just basically means how much more so. Okay. I don't believe we have the time to actually start the response that the Gemorah is going to give, but it's very geschmack. It's going to be a very enjoyable
Are we
piece
only
of
on the
Gemorah.
new question, or we covering both? We're only on the new question.
Well, we're going to remember we did last in first out, so we're going to be addressing the new kasha first.
Thanks, Rabbi.